In this part, we continue with the basics of the Swift programming language. So this is a new playgrounds file for Part B, Lesson 2. And in the previous part, we spoke about declaring variables. And when we declare the variable, we need to define the type of the variable, like int or double. Now, do we always need to define the type? Can't the computer or the compiler figure out what the type is? Do we need to explicitly tell it what the type is, like int or double or string or Boolean? Yes, the compiler is quite intelligent in that it can figure out what the type is by looking at the first value that you put into the variable. So let's take an example. Let's look at the statement here, var num1 equals to 10. You'll notice that I'm declaring a variable num1, but I'm not stating what its type is. How does the computer figure out what the type is? It looks at the first value, which is 10, and it then infers the type. It figures out the type that the value 10 is actually an integer, and will then make num1 of type integer based on this first value here. This is called type inference. It infers the type. It figures out the type. It looks at the first value that you put in, and then based on that first value, it knows what the type is. Let's look at the next statement. I'm declaring another variable called num2. I'm not defining that it's a double, but it figures out that it's a double based on this number here, 4.56. It figures out that 4.56 is a double, and therefore num1 will be of type double. Another example, here I'm declaring a constant called num3 using the let, and it figures out that the type of this constant num3 is actually integer, based on the number 20, which is an integer. So this is called type inference. Type inference. So that was integers, and that was double. Now there's another type called strings. Strings are a combination of characters. Let's take an example. I'm declaring a variable called first name, and its type is string. The keyword string. It is a variable, which means it has the initial value of John, but I can put in new values later on. That's why it's a variable string. And the name of the string is called first name, and this is the type, which is of type string, and I'm putting the initial value of John. Now, whenever you put strings into variables, you always include them in inverted commas. Let's declare another string. This time I'm declaring a string called surname, which is a variable. And notice I'm not putting in the type here. I'm not saying that surname is a string, but the compiler can figure out that it is a string based on this word here, Smith. It knows that Smith is a string, therefore it will make a variable called surname of type string. And we spoke about that early in this part where we talked about type inference. It's inferring the type of string and declaring surname as type string. Let's declare another string, type string, and this one is a constant because I'm using the keyword let, and I'm putting the value of Mr. into title. So I've defined three strings. One's called first name with John in it, one's called surname with Smith in it, and another one's called title with Mr. in it. Here I'm not using type inference, I'm declaring the type. Here I'm using type inference, where I'm not explicitly defining the type. The computer can infer that or figure that out. So these two are variables, and this one is a constant. I can also join strings together, and when we join strings together, this is called concatenation. And whenever we join or concatenate individual strings together to make one big string, we use the plus sign. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a new variable, which is a constant, and I'm calling this variable full name, and I'm saying take the string surname, add it to first name, add it to title. So join up title, first name, and surname, and combine them into one string and put that into this variable, this constant called full name. And you see the computer has concatenated those three individual strings and made a new string called full name, and you see the new string has the contents of Mr. John Smith, with a combination of the other strings. Let's move along to characters. Characters are either letters of the alphabet A to Z, or they could be numbers 0, 1, 2, 3. It could be special characters like question mark and asterisk and forward slash and backslash. Here I'm defining a variable called character 1, and I'm stating explicitly it's of type character, and I'm putting the capital A into it. Here I'm defining another variable called character 2 of type variable var, and I'm putting a question mark into it. In this second example, I'm not defining the type explicitly. I'm getting the compiler to figure out the type or infer the type, or I'm using type inference based on this first value here. In this statement, I declare another identifier called character 3, but this identifier is a constant, which means I cannot change it. Once I put the value 5 into it, I cannot change it. Yes, I'm defining 3 characters: character 1, character 2, and character 3. Now it's also possible to take individual characters and combine them to make up a string. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm defining a string called string 1, and I'm saying to the compiler, take character 3, convert it into a string. That's called typecasting. Convert it to a string. Also take character 2, convert it to a string, and then take character 1 and convert it to a string, and then combine these 3 strings which you formed from the characters into one string called string 1. And there you see it, it's A question mark 5, which is a combination of these 3 characters. Now we get to the last data type in this part of the lesson. This is called bool, B-O-O-L, and bool is short for Boolean. Another word for Boolean is binary, 1 or 0, or true or false. So here I'm declaring a variable called answer, and it's of type Boolean, which means it can only take in 2 values, true or false. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. When we come back, we'll deal more with the basics of Swift.